Sure, and thank you to our hosts for having us here today and for all of you for joining this conversation. My past experiences in Brussels have consisted of being shuttled between the airports and NATO and a hotel and back to NATO and back to an airport. So it's lovely to see that the sun shines in this city. It's a lovely place, and it's nice to be here outside of windowless conference rooms. So really appreciate everybody being here today and for our hosts for having us. So I'll talk a little bit about the national security side of climate change and how our country has evolved its thinking and what we're doing about this issue over the past decade or so. So if you look back 6, 7, 8 years to how the Defense Department and the national security community were thinking about climate change, it was very much considered a distant threat. Something to think about for the future and in terms of long-term planning. It was described as a phenomena that would shape different parts of the world in different ways, in very murky manners, but something that would happen in 2020, 2030, into the distant future. So our focus in the Department of Defense in particular years ago was mostly on the likelihood that the United States might have to increase its capacity for dealing with humanitarian assistance and disaster relief issues. It was very much just seen as severe weather events happening around the world that we might have to provide assets to help respond to, but very much limited to that in terms of what would happen in the immediate future. Then the world has changed dramatically since then. What happened was, while we were describing this as a distant threat to the United States and to our security interests, the Arctic opened up dramatically faster than what the best scientific projections at the time were telling us would happen. We have areas becoming ice-free much faster than anybody would have projected 2 decades ago or even a decade ago. We have countries building up their security forces and just operating completely differently in that region now than what we had projected before. Syria is another big case of where climate effects, there's empirical evidence to show that climate effects contributed to sort of the oppression of an evil dictatorship and many other trends in the region to compound the stress and contribute to what has become a multi-year civil war, regional instability, and complete upheaval in one of the key areas of the world, and again, much closer geographically to Europe than to the United States, but where we have military operations and bases ongoing, so heavy security interest there. There, a multi-year drought drove people in rural communities of different ethnicities and different sects into urban areas, compounding a lot of social stress, leading to a lot of joblessness and social pressure that then contributed with a lot of other things to an uprising against the Assad regime. So here you have a clear causal chain between environmental effects and huge unrest and instability in one of the key regions of the world that all of our countries are still trying to figure out how to grapple with. We have coastal bases all over the world for our Navy and Coast Guard, and those installations have had an increase in inundation as the sea level has risen differently in different areas of the world. Our Virginia, Hampton Roads, and Norfolk area is one of our largest naval bases in the world, and where we house a lot of assets. It's been inundated with saline intrusion, high sea level rise, massive storm surges that our infrastructure was just not built for. It was not built in envisioning a very, very heavily changing world. So we have a lot of heavy infrastructure investments that have been affected by climate change as well. So this is all why the security community inside government and beyond it, in a very apolitical, nonpartisan way, has completely changed how it views security as a climate threat. It's no longer a distant thing. It's no longer an abstract threat multiplier. Our newest national security strategy and defense documents and diplomacy guidance for our State Department all describe climate change now as a direct threat to the U.S. and its core interests. Those are security, both security threats, but also to our economic prosperity and stability, to homeland security. Everything you can think of is being affected in some way by climate change. So we now speak of it as a direct threat to the United States, which is a good thing. Our instruction is to not just observe that threat and to understand it's there, but all of our federal agencies, including for some of the work that Alden and Vicki described, are really working on what do we actually do about it. That's where the rubber really hits the road. Within the Defense Department, there's a lot of effort to incorporate better data and better modeling into decision making, and to make sure that decision makers all around the department are educated enough about the issue to know which scientists to turn to and which data sets might help inform their decisions on long-term infrastructure build, on long-term planning of where we might be operating in the world and what types of missions we might encounter. It's going to look probably different from what the world looks like today. Will we be operating in completely different regions, or responding a lot more frequently to natural disasters? What's the balance of activities that we have to train for, prepare for, equip for? Those are all big budget decisions that happen over multiple decades and have to be informed by what we know about the climate science as best we can now today. One of the big aspects of what, again, the Department of Defense, but all of our federal agencies are trying to do, and it's the core piece in our, if you look at the Quadrennial Defense and Diplomacy Review and the Quadrennial Defense Review, where we take our national strategy and really try and operationalize what it means for our departments. International cooperation forms the core of how we're supposed to be responding to climate change around the world. And that can look like a lot of different things. It's a new area, so we do have some international cooperation, to be sure, ongoing right now. But the demand signals from around the world are that we really need to increase our diplomacy and outreach and military-to-military cooperation regarding climate change. And I think that that's going to just get bigger and bigger and be a more robust part of our international engagement in a very positive way in the future. So one of the things to think about is now that the G7 has set this target of decarbonizing the energy economy by the end of the century, hopefully much faster, given our climate needs and the climate risks that we're facing. What does that mean for our defense forces and for our interoperability? So the Department of Defense, about 90% of its energy is, its mobile energy is petroleum. So as that sector changes, it's going to drive different energy requirements for the Department of Defense that will probably take many, many, many years to transition. Meanwhile, our NATO partnership, for example, our alliance is grounded in interoperability and us training and equipping and having forces that can work together. So one of the conversations as the United States shifts to experimenting with different types of fuels with the understanding that we need to move beyond the dependence just on petroleum over the coming decades, we need to make sure that the NATO alliance is having the conversation about how that's going to affect all of our forces and our ability to work together. Very, very important conversation, and a very positive one. Again, our countries can have these conversations, work together, and talk about how we move forward together in the future, which could have very, very positive effects. We're also seeing increasing demand, especially from the Asia-Pacific region, to work on climate change, including in military-to-military cooperation. If anybody tracks India at all or works with India, Prime Minister Modi recently said that climate change is a greater threat to India than terrorism, which is a pretty stark statement. I guess for us, for all of our countries, many of them have been hit by terrorist attacks in the past 15 years. India has definitely been hit by major, very, very distressing terrorist attacks and continued terrorist threats over the past years as well. So to say that climate change is going to be an even bigger threat from a country like that is a very, very stark statement. We've seen from India and many other countries an increasing demand for more knowledge and outreach and discussion about what the U.S. Department of Defense has been doing in thinking about climate change. And again, those are very positive conversations for building up strong relationships and helping share the lessons of all this good work that's going on in our country and taking that abroad and making that core of our international partnerships as well. I'll wrap up there. Turn onward.